we thought we'll open with an obvious demonstration of a conclusion that I think everyone knows. Anyone who's not going to jump on board on the digital transformation cart is going to end up there, like most of us at the end, but the question is, how long is it going to take us to get there? My name is Silon. I'm head of R&D at Atrinet. We're a small startup company, and we have come here today to speak about network transition and multi-vendor SDN enablement. Pretty big words, and I hope that by the end of my session today, it will become clearer. I'll take this opportunity to take this jacket away. I'm a development guy, not a marketing, but I wanted to come up with a jacket once in my life. So, I think we all know why the transformation is important. I think most of you service providers who are going to take some transformation use cases or transforming your network, you will know where do you want your network to end. Okay, you will choose some VNF vendors, you will choose an SDN controller that you want to deploy in your network, maybe an SD1 vendor. But how do you get there? Okay, I think this is something that's quite ignored, and sometimes when you're trying to get from point A to point B in the middle, you're going to find out that you should have thought about the route before you started walking on it. And one of the key points is that legacy is not very sexy to speak about, but this is an important part of the transformation. Okay, we are transforming from legacy to virtual network functions, to all of the shiny new toys that we all dream about. But we don't think so much about these. I don't know why the elephant is pink, by the way, but we don't think about one of the biggest challenges in the room. But this is what I'm going to speak about today. So I'm not going to speak about any sexy stuff today, actually. I'm not going to speak about any microservice, containerized virtual network function that's enable you to teleport to the moon. I'm not going to speak about the next generation SDN controller. In fact, the sexiest thing in the presentation today is either myself or the elephant, so I leave it to your own personal taste. And let's start speaking a little bit about how we can bridge the gap between this legacy network and the next generation. From Atrinet experience and from, I think, most of you people experience, some use cases have started to happen. Usually in most service providers, you can see that transformation stories are being done in a sort of a use case by use case scenarios. Maybe the initial drive to the transformation is business driven, cutting down on OpEx. Sometimes it's just like a marketing buzz. This service provider has already started deploying virtual CPE, so we should do it as well, okay? Never mind, okay? Everything is game. But this is point A, and there at the end is point B. And how do we get there? How do we get to point B? Well, first of all, I think the most important thing is to understand what is point A. And I think in most service providers' networks today, the understanding of the situation of the network today is really not clear, okay? And without understanding the situation and the infrastructure and the way devices are connected to other devices and what resources are used in the network today, if you're going to start doing the transformation activities, you're going to end up in the corollary to the Vietnam War from the American side, inside a telecom vendor, because you're going to hit up against a lot of walls, you're going to hit a lot of swamps, unless you have a true end-to-end network understanding of what's there in the network before you start any of these very complex endeavors later on. And the transformation itself, once you understood what's there in your network, should be, and we are in a zero-touch automation congress as far as I remember, should be, as far as possible, automated as well. So usually when we speak about automation, we speak about configuration automation of services. We speak about some new device popping up and configuring some initial pre-config on it. What I suggest and highly recommend is to try and automate the transition itself. And this can be done quite easily, just using existing tool sets that exist today in the automation area, and applying them to the migration transition process itself. So, a few useful tips from our own blood and sweat and from service providers' blood and sweat. End-to-end network understanding, we already mentioned it. I have a couple of deeper slides later on. I will try to speak about it in more depth. Second tip is what we call SDNization, or SDN everywhere. So basically, everyone is speaking about that network would be controlled by a domain service orchestrator, a domain controller, an SDN controller, but most of these management systems, regardless how we're calling them, have been developed and are equipped to manage the new type of functions in the network, the virtual network functions, the SD-WAN endpoints, and they have quite a problem in managing the old legacy devices. Now, I, by the way, like legacy devices, so I don't like to insult them, and I'm a guy who has problem with throwing away his old toaster oven. I'm one of the guys who, if I'm throwing away something that's still working, I put a note on it. This is still working. And then I put it on the street because I want someone else to pick it up. So these traditional devices, these PNFs, they're going to stay here for a long time. Some of them are really working well, and even better than that, and we want to keep them. And even the ones that are working not so well and we want to throw them away, it's not like we're just going to one day go to the network and tear everything out and throw it to the garbage. It's going to take incremental steps. Again, if you're going use case by use case, you're going to virtualize some parts of the network, some endpoints of the service, and you will still have these traditional devices to manage, and you would want to manage them under one umbrella. How do you do that? So you have to make a way for these traditional devices to speak SDN. You want to SDNize them, so the next generation OSS or SDN controller would be able to manage them as well. Otherwise, you're going to end up with yet another controller management system in your network in addition to the other legacy management system that you have there, and it's going to be quite complex to use and to manage, and probably your network engineers will want to kill you. As I've said, automation of transformation can be done, very recommended, otherwise you're just going to end up with engineers configuring stuff in a manual way, which is exactly the thing you want to avoid. And lastly, openness. Now is the chance to pick the vendors, the systems that support and promote openness, okay? I'm guessing that in your network today, you have some traditional devices that can at least be managed via CLI or TL1 or whatever, but you have some devices that you have no way to manage other than using their vendor network management system, and you're stuck because of it. You cannot even build code layers on top of these devices to fit them in the new type of network management system. This is the time when you're making new decisions and picking new stuff to deploy in your network to make sure that these support open APIs. Now, I don't care if it's Yang or Netconf or Netconf Yang or REST APIs. Make sure they support some type of well-documented external API, and they're declared that they're open. Maybe they declare that they're also following some standard bodies, also important. Make sure, otherwise you're going to regret this 10 years from now when the next digital transformation #2 is going to take place. So, what I wanted to do in my presentation is not to be so high-level marketing guy who give out a lot of slogans, which I think I've spent 10 minutes of doing already. I wanted to give true use cases that we see all around us happening and understand how these can help in the transformation use cases that we see happening all around and are going to take place in the next 5 till 10, 15 years, if you're pessimistic or optimistic. So network understanding. There is a traditional sort of discovery thing going around for quite some years, which says, let's try and harvest information from the network, okay? Gather the devices that are there, the links that are there, configurations that are there. Maybe I can deduce which services are configured on each device, and so on. Very useful to have this, by the way. But what I recommend is to have an additional layer on top of that, which would correlate sort of the configurational, statistical information that can be read from the network, and the more dynamic part of the analytics that can be read from the network and correlate them together, something which not usually done so much. So you have harvesting of inventory-like information from the network and harvesting of a lot of statistics and SLA and KPIs, dashboard here, dashboard there. But if you correlate these information, you can get real insights. For example, which links are underutilized or overutilized, but not just that. This link is underutilized and only one service is configured on the network to go through this link. And this is where the service is configured. This is the service chain. So maybe a specific link which is really underutilized is going through some off-net link, third party, which you're paying shitloads of money to. So this is the chance to divert this traffic away. Identifying wrong service paths. So get the configuration of the service, a service that you want to transform, for example. Let's say that you have some business service that has a lot of sites with CPEs, and you want to transform some of these CPEs to virtual CPEs, okay? But maybe for the really, for those sites that you know are really delicate, maybe you want to make this transformation the last, okay? You want to start with the easy sites. So get into discovering what's really there in the network, understand all of the service paths that are going between the sites and the main CPEs or VRF or what have you, and also identify wrong service paths, because what's configured in the network doesn't mean that the service path actually goes there. There are so many fail-safe mechanisms running in the network. Some of them are not in the service level. They are in the utility or the branch level, in the trunk level, and you can find out that actually a service goes like this, even if it's supposed to go like this. This is the time before you start transforming your network to make the house clean, to prune your network, to get rid of some underutilized or overutilized resources before you start doing the really heavy lifting. One nice example that a lot of people forget when they're talking about transformation is that transformation doesn't necessarily have to mean taking PNFs and transforming them with VNFs, but actually the transformation is taking place also on the higher levels. migrating from an old inventory system to a new inventory system. Usually this is done in the scope of changing your old legacy OSS system to another NG OSS system. And what you can do is take the information from the old inventory system and just copy it or push it to your new inventory system. So don't do that, okay? Please don't do that. I think it was mentioned earlier today. I was not here, but someone briefed me that service providers are talking about how much deficient data, or I'm going to use the S word, how much subpar data exists in this old inventory system, okay? What we see is about 30 till 50% information is deficient, reported by the service provider themselves. This is what they think. So if they think that 50% of the information there is deficient, probably 70% is deficient. So why carry this onward? Just discover the information from the network itself. That's the truth, okay? That's the truth. So discover everything, push it to the new inventory system, and maybe enrich this information with some parts of the old inventory system that are completely logical, that cannot be read from the network itself. This is a very, very important transformation use case because it is actually sometimes the stepping stone to doing the use case of transforming PNFs to VNFs. You first of all choose an NG-OSS system or SD1 controller, for example, and then start doing the network transformation themselves. Going back to SDNization. So, and excuse me, anyone who is hurt by the examples on top, ODL or ONAP, it can be anything. It can be a domain controller. It can be an end-to-end service orchestrator. Usually today, the focus of this system is, where's the point? In here. They know how to manage the new VNFs or maybe new network elements that supports Yang device models that support the standard service models. And all of this is one black hole to them. They cannot manage these devices. What you would want to do, I'm guessing, is to have some sort of a magical layer here which would SDNize these devices and expose them to this management layer as if they themselves speak SDN or build Yang device models for these devices. And in this way, this next generation OSS orchestration would truly be able to manage the network end-to-end, the legacy, traditional part of it, and the new, shiny VNF parts of it. Because that's what you're going to have. You're going to have services which are composed out of the legacy, traditional parts, and the new, shiny VNF parts. And I am guessing you would like to manage them all under one umbrella. So that's the way to reach that. Zero-touch provisioning. Again, we are in Zero-touch Automation Congress. So usually zero-touch is something that's considered to be identifying some new device, popped up in the network, and then flushing down some new software version and maybe some pre-config. And then usually a technician still have to connect to the device and enter a lot of manual commands to the device. Why? Because it's not just the basic pre-config that has to be downloaded to a new device. There are a lot of more intricate configuration. For example, in the data center, if the device is a leaf or a spine in a closed network, you would like to apply different configuration. If the device is a CPE of type A and it is connected to an aggregation device of type B, you might want to download different configuration than if it was configured to a device of type C, because this is a residential business customer of this type, and this is a residential customer of another type. So a lot of interesting use cases exist today. I won't bore you with more. You can see this at our booth number 19. I'll be happy if anyone come and speak more about this. Very interesting time, very exciting times. Thank you very much, everyone.